Think about a teacher. While we say that education's transformational, that great schools change students' lives, it's really great teachers who change lives. Everyone transformed by the power of education remembers a teacher who changed their life. For me, it began with Miss Alvernaz, the first grade teacher who created a classroom with experiences that showed me that I was a writer. A thread that continued through to Mr. Dino in my senior year of high school, whom I still recall saying he's a merchant of words, encouraging me and inspiring me to be one too. Even though I thought I was headed for a career as a research scientist. Inspiring teachers change lives. In my case, teachers impacted me so much that I never left school. From my ancient Greek teacher in college, who stopped in his tracks one day just to say, "Look at the beauty of this line of poetry." He was overcome. From that professor to a professor of Milton in graduate school who read a poem at my wedding, a tribute to the way that she taught me to think differently about so many things, including the power of magical thinking. While I've brought these images of teachers who impacted me to mind, perhaps you've been thinking about the teachers who changed the path of your life. It's really true. While we say that schools change kids' lives, it's really teachers who change kids' lives. Education research tells us that the single most important school-based factor in student achievement is an effective teacher. We know this from our own experience and common sense as well. So it's by invoking memories of the great teachers who changed our lives that I want to invite you to this year's event, the State of Viewpoint School. Tonight we'll be introducing the latest work on our strategic framework for Viewpoint's future, including two important announcements about programs that will have an impact on the education of every single student. Our strategy is fully focused on our students. So while I invite you to have the teachers in mind, you can be assured that the teachers have the students in mind. After a brief introduction to our strategic framework, I'll be joined on the stage by a panel including our head of primary school, Kathy Edelman, and our director of college counseling, Rhodey Davis, so that we can represent the full spectrum of education from kindergarten through 12th grade and beyond. Before I begin, I want to talk about the future, as our strategy is concerned with the world that our students will inherit and lead. The future, they say, is already here, and we already know the truth. Some great percent, 70 to 80% in one count, of the jobs that exist today will be gone in 20 years. You might have read Tom Friedman's book, Thank You for Being Late, in which he describes this age of acceleration that we're living in. How many of you have read Tom Friedman's book? I strongly encourage you to have a look at it, because he describes these three ages of acceleration which are all happening at the same time, all of them exponential curves. And if you know the exponential curve, there's a point at which it goes up to infinity. Those three accelerations are the change of globalization of our economy, the change of climate and Mother Nature, and the change of Moore's law, or microprocessor speed, so the changing pace of technology. And those three changes can be graphed, and all three of them map onto this incredible age of acceleration. So if you feel like you can't keep up today, whether it's with your email count or your kid, Tom Friedman explains why. I'll tell you, it has us focused on what does that mean for school, because I know we all feel like we can't keep up with the pace of change. It's become a bit of a cliche to talk about being a school of the future, and yet we're making true what a school for the future is. Take a look at our lifers. This is the name for Viewpoint students who've been here 13 years, and this group of students gathered on the Love of Learning wall recently to plan their future spring. A lifer lunch that they'll have to celebrate their 13 years at Viewpoint. These are the students who've gone through from kindergarten through 12th grade together. When we think about when these lifers entered kindergarten in 2004 or 5, not that long ago for those of us who are adults in the room, And even they can remember a little wistfully what it was like for them to be in kindergarten. So some of you are parents of kindergartners, others of you are parents of 12th graders. So think about when these 12th graders were in kindergarten. What did technology look like at Viewpoint School? Well, this was the state-of-the-art computer lab that students were able to use in our lower school. It looks quaint now, but at the time, this was quite cutting edge. And here from our yearbook, you see what students could do to explore further in technology when these lifers, today's lifers, were in kindergarten. You can see a video game design club with 4 students in it. One of those students, by the way, Ernie Acosta, has now returned to Viewpoint as an alum and a teacher of robotics and physics, an assistant teacher working down in the upper school. And on the right, that Linux at Lunch Club does have one brave girl on the right joining those boys to learn programming language at the time, which was quite cutting edge. This is how we advertised our technology program to people looking at kindergarten to join those lifers in that class. What's happened in just the short time since our 12th graders were in kindergarten? Well, this is what technology looks like today. And so you have Weston Belgettis, who's programming with his fellow classmates, programming in virtual reality, using digital photography, using very advanced techniques. You have Persia there, who's working with Mrs. Honig, her film teacher, to edit film on a notebook computer. This is our Girls in STEM Club. 50 strong, they invite guest speakers to campus to show, and you can see they're girl-powered there. They invite guest speakers to campus to make sure that the next generation of engineers and scientists to graduate from Viewpoint are not 90% male. They also mentor younger students, and you can see here that the older girls and boys in the Girls in STEM Club take a special interest in inviting younger students. And they're inspired by Mrs. Rush, who's a phenomenal teacher who's really embraced the power of social and emotional learning, even as she's embraced teaching physics and engineering and computer science. And here you see the tools that students use from lower school, those 5th graders there programming on an iPad in an upper school physics classroom led by 12th grader Chloe. Or Ben on the left, an alum from the class of 2017, who's using very advanced technology in his Film 4 honors class. We can see how far technology has come in a Viewpoint education just in the time that our kindergartners have become lifers. So, what about our kindergartners of today? What will the technology be like in the classrooms in 2030 when they're in 12th grade and they're the lifers? If you know, then I'll invite you up here to give the rest of this talk because I think the truth is that none of us knows. So these students bring us to our strategic framework, which entirely focuses the future of the school on our mission, on students, and their needs. We are laser focused on what students are going to be needing in the future. We've had a process of developing our strategic framework that has resulted in this draft we present tonight. A year ago, you'll recall that we shared with you the results of survey research and interview research. We reached out to every parent in the school, people who had visited the school, who had applied, people who had come to the school, and people who had turned down our offer of admission. And we took all of that research and then the thinking of the Strategic Planning Committee of the Board of the Trustees, our administration, and our faculty, and we have boiled it down to this strategic framework tonight. You'll notice it's called a draft because we share it with you in the interest of your feedback and because a framework is a truly living thing. It will inform the planning of our education year after year going forward. We also will have a talkback session tomorrow morning, and we look forward to the spring listening hard to our community and how they respond to the ideas in this framework so that we can really be planning our future collaboratively together so that it becomes a shared vision. Our vision for the future of a Viewpoint education is to be grounded in our values and in a culture of innovation, to be an innovation leader in independent education, preparing students for inspired lives of creative leadership and positive impact in a changing world. Our strategic plan is focused on 5 elements, all of them grounded in our core values. And while I won't read to you all of the words from our strategic framework on these slides, I will go through them so that you can see them. And I want you to know that it boils down to 5 elements that are inspired by these values. The people of Viewpoint, the programs in our classrooms, the community that's at the center of it all, the campus which inspires us, and financial sustainability, which is the foundation for our future. So you see here the values from our mission statement that inspire us. Well, our strategic plan begins with people. And so I share with you some people in this photograph. You might recognize some of the people. Viewpoint faculty who've been here a while not only recognize Jack and Jackie Kennedy or LBJ and Lady Bird Johnson. You can see Harry S. Truman and Bess Truman, and you can see Eisenhower there. But there's also someone else. This is Dr. Bill Levy, who is an Episcopal priest who presided, what's this photo? He presided at Eleanor Roosevelt's funeral in 1962. He was an amazing man who lived an amazing life. He was a confidant and special friend of Mrs. Roosevelt, and he went on to teach at Viewpoint School. You come to the 80s, 20 years later, and he taught this young man. This is Seth. Seth is from the class of 91. He's a member of our board of trustees and a proud alum of Viewpoint. When Seth went to the high school in the 80s, graduating in 91, his graduating class had about a dozen people. Viewpoint looked very different at that time. But one of his favorite teachers was Dr. Levy, who could tell him stories about Eleanor Roosevelt and about his life. Seth will tell you about his experiences of Dr. Levy, who encouraged him to think about the world differently, encouraged him to try new experiences and do things he never did. Seth, a vegetarian, would be encouraged by Dr. Levy to try just about anything, and in fact, sometimes he got sick because he was willing to be culinarily adventurous with Dr. Levy. Seth went on from Viewpoint to be an entrepreneur and to start a company devoted to a very innovative textile. And his company, after 8 years, recently won FDA approval to make his textile as a medical device. It turns the infrared heat from our bodies into healing energy. It's an amazing accomplishment for this young entrepreneur and member of our board of trustees. He sits on the strategic planning committee, and so I share this story to tell you about our strategic framework and where it got its start. As we were talking about how we would be focused on Viewpoint's future, we talked about teachers. And Seth spoke about Dr. Levy, about the impact that Dr. Levy had on his life, about how Dr. Levy is still with him today, even though he passed away a few years ago. Seth wanted to do something very special for Viewpoint, and so he's created something that I want to announce to explain what does it mean that our strategic framework is focused on people. So he decided that he could do something for Viewpoint and for the future, and he created the William Turner Levy Endowed Chair for Inspired Teaching. Yes, that's worthy of applause. So tonight we announce the first endowed chair at Viewpoint School created by our loyal alum Seth in honor of one of his teachers, in order to inspire the next generation of teachers, to inspire that next generation of students. It's an amazing honor to Dr. Levy, to remember him in this way so that generations of teachers will remember the impact that he had. And it's a tribute to Seth that that was what his character called on him to do. So that's what is meant when we say that the first goal of our strategic plan is people. To engage, diversify, and develop our faculty, staff, and administration so that we have the best teachers anywhere. The goals in our strategy around people, you can see, include ensuring that our faculty has the cutting edge of professional development so that they are always refining their craft in the classroom, their knowledge and their skills that they share with students every day. And we'd like to create 10 or more endowed faculty chairs. We have a faculty of some 150, and I can imagine honoring more than just one of them with a Dr. Levy chair. You can see goals here around diversifying the faculty, staff, and administration, and retaining, rewarding, and recruiting our world-class faculty. This is our people goal. We've been so inspired by this goal already, and by Seth's example, that we have taken the Hanley Endowment and created a second endowed chair, the Hanley Chair. The Hanley Endowment supports American studies. And then the Board of Trustees has seen fit to take some strategic reserves and create 2 more board-designated viewpoint chairs for teaching excellence. These will be created with some teacher nomination, and the leadership of the school will name the first class of endowed teaching chairs this spring, who will hold these chairs beginning in the fall. So that's people. The second element is program, and Viewpoint has an authentic claim to a tradition of innovation living out here on the western edge of Los Angeles. Through such programs as our Science and Engineering Expo that took place today. This is 21st century learning at its best, even in the aura of a traditional science fair. You see, students here practice design thinking skills, problem solving, creativity, communications. Design thinking includes empathy, and so you see that her broken arm inspired her to create this remote-controlled backpack to solve the problem of how do I get around school with this very heavy backpack? Since innovation has not yet solved the problem of all of those textbooks in the backpack, she's going to solve it for us. It's not just in our lower school that students are in programs that encourage them to innovate. This is Anthony. On the left, you see Anthony teaching an AP Computer Science Principles course, which Mrs. Rush offered for the first time this year in the upper school. Anthony exhausted all of our math and computer science curriculum really a long time ago, and so Mrs. Rush saw him as a student who could help her by teaching others. As Anthony described what it meant to him to teach younger students subjects about which he was passionate, he said that even though this material was very familiar, he understood it more and more deeply as he taught it. Many of you know that our school has a fine tradition of robotics that's in its 10th year at Viewpoint. And this year, we've taken our first exploration into what's called the First Robotics Competition, or FRC. We've had 10 years of competing with VEX, and this is our first year of competing with FRC. They're 2 very different robotics competitions. VEX extends across a whole year and has a small set of defined set of resources, whereas FRC is compressed into a short period of time, and students can design just about anything they can. Anthony is one of our top coders, and so he joined the FRC team to help code that robot you see on the right there, which I watched in very dim light one evening track something. So it can see and it can follow autonomously a moving target. And it's not just about STEM, engineering, coding. Innovation in program also finds a home in our lower school, in language arts, and in social emotional learning. This is Mrs. Ikoy, who in 4th grade is leading a responsive classroom morning meeting that grounds every student in a community of classroom where they find their voice and connect with one another so that the classroom is a close, high-touch environment where students feel safe to take risks and make mistakes. Kate also has been supported by our commitment to people, our commitment to professional development, to go to Teachers College in New York, Teachers College, Columbia University, New York, to study the Reading Project and Writing Project, and has brought back with some of her colleagues new approaches to teaching reading and writing in her 4th grade classroom. The approach to writing in the writing workshop results in Grace's essay. Grace in 3rd grade took a writing workshop project of a persuasive essay and used it to write about something that mattered to her. One of the things that Writing Workshop encourages teachers to do is to inspire students to write about things that matter to them personally. You can see that Grace is upset about the fact that the boys and the girls have different expectations on Assembly Dress Day. And her essay goes on. I tell you, I see applications from adults for employment that don't look this good. You see that she goes on to say that the differences that she notes in boys' and girls' assembly dress are dangerous as well as unfair and uncomfortable. We're teaching students that words matter, and one of the results of Grace's many revisions of her personal essay was that her words resulted in a meeting with Mrs. Antoine and me, where we could tell her that she had persuaded us to have a look at our uniform policies for girls in the lower school. You see, we're willing to take risks and innovate, and I'm glad that line got the applause it deserved. So we announced that in the program goal, we're creating the Viewpoint Center for the Future of Education. Headed by our Chief Innovation Officer and supported by all of our faculty, and guided by current educational research, the Center for the Future of Education is a place to design, develop, and measure innovative learning strategies, tools, and experiences. We're committed to supporting our teachers in exploring innovative learning, in exploring interdisciplinary approaches, in connecting all of the great things that are happening all across our campus. It's one of the reasons we recruited a Chief Innovation Officer in Annika Emerson over there. Hi, Annika. She'll have a tall order to do. And this is one of the goals in our program section. Viewpoint has a commitment to academic excellence, Mr. Wolfson said, attracted him and his family here and perhaps attracted you as well. And yet, we cannot stand still. The world continues to change, and so Viewpoint will change with it. So we must evolve and align our educational program. What does a commitment to program mean? Well, establishing the Viewpoint Center for the Future of Education. Establishing a center for wellness and balance. You see, the commitment that we talked about with Responsive Classroom in our K through 5 is an early example of what it means to be focused on social and emotional learning, on wellness and balance. You see a renewed focus or a new focus on teaching entrepreneurship, ethics, and leadership skills. Viewpoint has a signal commitment to public speaking that begins in kindergarten when students take stage and can speak to 200 people in front of a microphone, and it continues all the way up through our primary and lower school. There are other examples of public speaking throughout our middle and upper school that we want to knit together as just a part of our commitment to leadership. Taking a look at what our students are doing in robotics and coding and film, clearly these young engineers and innovators are going to need entrepreneurs to go with them. And today's 4th grade engineering expo convinced me that the future of entrepreneurship at this school is very, very safe. And that focus on ethics, you see that we're preparing creative leaders. The world needs leaders more than ever, and they need leaders who are grounded in core values and in ethical reasoning. You see, our program commitment includes commitments to nature and the environment, and it challenges us to extend the Viewpoint education, whether to local employers, colleges and universities, or opportunities around the world, to really build on the excellence we already have. At the center of our strategy is a goal for community. And you see here another fine Viewpoint tradition of public speaking, the 5-Up, which is an emblem of our community. Students give, students and members of our community give 5-minute talks on subjects that are important to them. In this case, Ty, a Viewpoint parent, Mr. Sanchez, a Viewpoint employee, and 2 students, Jansen and Simone, who are 12th graders, who are giving their senior speeches as part of a 5-up, gave a talk. So you see that it isn't just about robotics and engineering, but also about public speaking, leadership, and the written and spoken word that we're focused. I mention this under the heading of community because what it means when all of us get connected under the heading of connecting our community and learning about one another. It was at a 5-up that many of the people who've worked with Mr. Sanchez for many years learned things about his upbringing that they'd never heard before. And that is one of the things that connects us, gives us a sense of belonging, and helps us to feel safe. Last week, I had to share this photo. It was so inspiring. To celebrate Chinese New Year, our entire upper school community gathered on the plaza. Part of our commitment to community this year, we've begun gathering our entire upper school student body on the plaza so they can all see one another. And last week, that took the form of a Chinese New Year assembly. You might know our upper school student population is so large it exceeds the capacity of this theater. And so they can form upper school community. And then they went on to a Chinese food tasting, which was hosted by our Chinese-speaking parent community. And while some of the parents who've been in our community the longest would say that when they first started those Chinese food tastings, there might be a couple of parents in line, we now had a whole line of parents celebrating their culture and tradition with our students. So community is at the center of our plan. And here is our community goal: to foster active and meaningful engagement among all of the school's constituencies. So what does that mean? Establishing a Viewpoint network. Viewpoint has a pretty young alumni base as the school grew significantly in size about 15 years ago. And so unlike schools that might have many alumni around the world, the vast majority of Viewpoint alumni are younger, and they have phenomenal opportunities to mentor young students by being connected to them. And they have opportunities to connect to one another that will be increasingly valuable to them. So we see the Viewpoint network can add value not only to the alumni's experience, but to the experience of students and parents as well, connecting us all so we can benefit from the richness that all of us bring to Viewpoint. You see, we're also committed to expanding and improving what we do in digital communications, engaging our parents and alumni in new ways, extending our commitments to diversity and inclusivity, and extending our commitments to service learning as part of the goal of which community is at the center. I want to share with you one of the projects that we've done this year to highlight our next goal. Back when Viewpoint was just on 12 acres, these were the batting cages, and they were in the back of the house. You know, you put things like batting cages in the backyard. As Viewpoint expanded to 25 and then 40 acres, and then built the new Robertson Family Field, these batting cages occupied a place of prime importance in the center of the campus. We took the building of the field as the opportunity to build new batting cages for our baseball and softball programs, improving their situation. And we saw that this once forgotten backyard corner could actually become something more like a central park. And with a pretty modest investment, we have a very big impact, creating an outdoor classroom so that students can gather outdoors in a space that's not quite so covered with concrete, adjacent to the beautiful ecolet and the garden curriculum. Students are so engaged these days in our garden curriculum and in our environmental sustainability efforts, led by Mr. Adam Yates there, that nature is one of the primary values and goals that we have as we look at our next goal, which is our campus. You see that while our first goal is people, and our people lead us to a program, communities at the center, we do still value our campus in our strategic framework and prize the natural beauty of these Santa Monica Mountains in this magical canyon. So what this means for us is to complete our next master plan. The building of that Robertson Family Field was the last project in the last master plan approved by the city of Calabasas. And so one of the things in the next chapter of development will be for us to think about how we use our facilities and steward them for the next generation. A goal around enhancing our existing campus. We have world-class facilities, and we look to find ways that we can continue to evolve and adapt them for the needs of 21st century learning, to find opportunities to connect our community as we are in that Upper School Plaza photo I shared, and to connect us to nature as we are in that Ecolet photo I shared. And then we also challenge ourselves to think about campus opportunities beyond Calabasas. The foundation of it all is our fifth goal, and this is news as fresh as today's Wall Street Journal. Our Board of Trustees, our administration, and I are very focused on how to pay for it all. And so, if nothing else gets your attention, we often look for analogies in higher education. And today's Wall Street Journal reports on the colleges which are sorting themselves out financially into winners and losers. We often see that while the industries that we're in, independent education and higher education, are different, they have different forces, and our budgets are different, of course. We do look at higher education as an example of what's happening financially and economically in the world of education to see what the implications are for Viewpoint. So our fifth goal in our strategic framework is financial sustainability. Practicing sustainability in the development and management of our resources so that we steward the future of this fine institution and lead the way in thinking about different ways of operating. A commitment to innovation isn't only about what happens in the classroom. Innovation must also challenge us to work differently and to think about the way we conduct our business differently so that we can, again, be here tomorrow and 100 years from now. So you see here 4 goals under the heading of financial sustainability. A long-range financial plan which wraps together the questions of tuition sustainability and our proud commitment to financial aid, where we award over $5 million every year to ensure socioeconomic diversity and to make a Viewpoint education accessible to more and more students every year. To inspire our donor community to think about how we can pay for the future of a Viewpoint education and the needs of those students who are entering kindergarten today. To explore new opportunities and to think about Viewpoint's enrollment future, even as we think about the master plan for the campus. So those are the 5 goals of our strategic plan: the people, the programs, the community, the campus, and financial sustainability. And again, while I invited you to think about the teachers who've changed you, our teachers are firmly focused on those students, on the leadership challenges that they will face, and on the ways that we can challenge ourselves to make them better and better for that future. Before we go to our Q&A, I also want to share with you one of our core commitments, which is to student safety. I hope that you're as inspired and excited as I am about the future that lies ahead for our students and about the opportunities that we have to meet that future. But of course, one of the first things we have to do is make sure that we keep kids safe. It's the #1 reason that we're all here. And so I share with you something I shared with the faculty that we'll be rolling out to our parent community, and that is an anonymous reporting system. I mentioned to the VSSA in their executive board meeting this week that no educator can have experienced the events in Parkland, Florida last week without really being shaken. It's an educator's worst nightmare, anyone who cares about children, and certainly a parent's worst nightmare, that when you send your child to school, you want to make sure they come home. It's not only the sort of threats of violence we saw at Parkland, but also other threats to our school safety that might lead us to ensure our safety with an anonymous reporting system. So we'll be rolling this out. And I share it with you tonight in person so I can share with you a couple of caveats. One is that this does not replace, it only augments the #1 safety and security system, which again is our people. our people, our trusting communication and our trusting relationships are really what keeps us safe. And so this is not to change any of the channels that already exist for you to communicate with Viewpoint School. It's yet to add another last resort. And the second caveat is that this is an act of trust, that we invite you to use this system so that we can continue to build those bonds of trust that unite students and the school and parents who are trusting us with their children. This is what it looks like when you go there, by the way. When you log in, you'll find the name of our school, and you can see there a drop-down menu of the sorts of things that one might report on. And while it is perhaps a sad state of the world that we need an anonymous reporting system, I think education is late to the game versus other industries that have had things like this for a while in place. And so I share this with you tonight as another example of action that we're taking in response to a world that's increasingly threatening to ensure our commitments to safety. So we're now going to move into questions and answers.